Okay, boxing fanatics, welcome to the 33rd episode of the podcast. And today we're going to discuss, well, another upset, another massive upset, to be fair, in the heavyweight division. Fabio Wardley stopping Joseph Parker in what I guess many people didn't predict. I remember looking at the bookies, and Joseph Parker was a really, really strong favorite. Even on the week of the fight, he was such a strong favorite. But Fabio Wardley just keeps shocking people really. Keeps shocking people and, definitely getting the best win of his career. Um, what's your initial reaction to last Saturday?
Honestly, it was stunning to be honest. It was you know what I mean? Like with the Justice Hooney fight, I think that was just because no one saw that happening, of course. That kind of showed Fabio to be this fighter that you can just never predict what's going to happen. Like he's always
Mm,
going to be in these dramatic fights. Even the first Fraser Clark fight, where they went absolutely hell for leather for 12 rounds, one of the
mhm,
most thrilling heavyweight fights in recent memory. Then in a rematch where he absolutely poleaxed him, for want of a better word.
mhm,
Um, I mean, that was, pretty shocking moment, really. And obviously the Justice Hooney fight, where down on all the cards, losing pretty much every round,
mhm.
and he pulled this knockout from out of nowhere. But this one against Joseph Parker was pretty different. I mean, both men showed just tremendous resilience and durability. I think Fabio Wardley especially, I saw him eat some monstrous shots, and I was just like, what are you made of?" You know what I mean? Like, I was like, what on earth? Like, who created this machine who can just absorb so much punishment and then come back firing? And what's particularly impressive about Fabio Wardley is how comfortable he is, um, in those kind of exchanges where both of them are trading leather, and he could get knocked out at any moment. You feel like, and he's just there riding the shots. He's got his chin tucked behind his shoulder, and you're thinking you're really kind of playing with fire here. Like you're really rolling the dice, but he just seems to absolutely love it. Like that's just his. He looks like he's in his element when he's kind of riding those shots, and he's springing back with your counter here and there. And a lot of people get sort of phased by that, and that you want your fighter to be a little bit more defensively responsible, but he just embraces it. Like he absolutely loves those types of exchanges, and I think that definitely just plays to his advantage. Like I think we now need to start talking about Fabio Wardley as as a pretty special fighter, really, because for all this time, he's had this white collar tag, and we're all saying, oh, he hasn't got the technical ability to compete with the top elite level heavyweights. Well,
Mhm.
now he's just I know the stoppage was controversial. We'll probably speak about that in a minute, but he's just beaten arguably the second best heavyweight in the world. Well, what a lot of people consider to be anyway. Um, and the fact that he's doing this with such little experience, I think it takes, a particularly talented person to be able to do that. And I think the best way you can sum up Fabio Ward is he's just a natural fighter. Like this is what I
100%.
mean when he finds that comfort in the chaos. And I think with that, you've either got it or you don't. Like you can't really teach that. It's kind of like fighting instinct, isn't it? And I think he's absolutely got that. I mean, it was funny after his win there was this video of one of his white collar fights that did the rounds of social media. I don't know if you saw it.
I haven't seen it,
But
to be fair. What happened?
no, well the thing is, like he was obviously massively reckless, and he weren't, as polished as he is now. But you can see like the style hasn't changed. Like the kind of essence of his style is still the same, where he's just kind of got those gloves low, and he's just kind of he's swiveling his shoulders back and forth, and he's just trying to, like, this is what I mean. Like, he's a massive risk taker, and he's absolutely fearless. Like, he doesn't care what's coming his way, and
Mm.
that's kind of what I saw in that white collar clip. But the only difference is that he's obviously refined his skill set over the years, and he's now become a little bit more of a complete fighter. But in terms of the essence of his style, that was very much there from the beginning.
100%, 100% agree with completely what you're saying. I mean, yeah, like, I think you summed it up perfectly. Just a natural born fighter, really, isn't he, Fabio? Natural born fighter. The guy has a fighting instinct. He has something that a lot of fighters just don't have. We credit all boxers for getting in the ring, but the reality is, for a lot of them, when it gets really tough in there, some of them are looking for a way out, and I don't blame them. I can never do what they do, but you know, Fabio Wall is literally that guy who goes out on his shield no matter what. The guy will. You have to literally lay this guy out on the canvas, otherwise, he will not go away. He will never give up. He'll just keep going. He keeps swinging for the fences. That's what he does. He just swings for the fences all the time. To be honest, instead, I did get my prediction wrong in my preview. I thought Parker, I thought like most people, Parker would just be too much for him. I thought Parker just boxing skills would be too good. I mean, we saw the Hooney fight, Hooney, I mean, Hooney's performance actually looks really good now, to be honest, because Parker did not do that to Wardley at all. Like Hooney was like heavyweight Lomachenko in there against Wardley. It was really boxed well. So that's looks good on Hooney. Anyway, yeah, it was a very competitive fight. Yeah, you have to credit Wardley. You do have to credit Wardley, obviously. Um, but I just before we get on to like the controversy and stuff like that. I mean, do you think Parker actually used the right tactics? Because he came on the scale. I think it was 262 pounds. And I did allude to this in my preview. I said this is like a bit of a new version of Parker because I think previously we've kind of criticised him for being a bit negative sometimes and just kind of boxing a bit too much in the back foot. But the last three fights, I'd say he's been a little bit more aggressive, and I think he really fought in a way that he wanted to knock Wardley out this time around. But maybe in hindsight, that was the wrong decision because he was still the better boxer in there probably overall. And I don't know, maybe he kind of just played right into Wardley's hands with his kind of tactics. What do you think about that? I mean, did Park use the right tactics in this fight? Could he have won if he was more cautious, if he, didn't get into a dogfight, so to speak?
Well, I thought it was quite interesting what we saw in the opening round, where it seemed to me like Parker actually hurt Wardley
Mm,
quite noticeably. And I was actually thinking for a minute, like this could be an early night because I saw Parker kind of really with this, really intense approach, and Wardley looked a little bit out of his depth. But although it was only in the first round and it was just, for a few minutes, I feel like the levels kind of showed like a little bit in that opening round. Then you see in round two, it's the complete reverse story where Wardley is the one
mm,
more or less hurting Parker. And I think Parker, when he got stung, the difference was like he tried to fight fire with fire, which is exactly what Wardley does, and that
mm.
works for Wardley, but it
Yeah.
doesn't work for a fighter like Parker, who, as you say, you'd want him to kind of use his technical advantages, and I think we saw in large portions of the fight that Parker, in terms of, it's difficult to explain because they're both quite quick heavyweights, but they've both got a lot of speed. But I'd actually argue Parker in terms of his foot speed. I think he's a little bit quicker, and I just kind of noticed that quite early on, where he would be in and out with his movement, and he was a lot more fluid and not a lot more fluid, but like what I mean. He was a bit more
Yeah,
tidy
yeah,
with his work,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I feel like the speed was kind of with him a little bit in that sense. The difference with Wardley is obviously he comes into range and launches these really explosive attacks, and that kind of makes him seem really fast, which he is. But I think Parker kind of uses speed a little bit more intelligently, and he didn't really do that as the fight progressed. I thought there was a lot of promising signs from him, especially in that opening round. And if he would have, you know, just been a little bit cuter with that movement in terms of just maintaining that throughout the fight, being in and out with his movement, stepping to the side and,
Mm.
creating angles and stuff. I feel like the early signs were really promising. And then he just kind of thought, fuck it, this is a dogfight. Let me just, he just kind of surrendered
Yeah,
himself to the fact that, they would basically just throw the kitchen sink at each other. And, that works that just plays into Wardley's hands, doesn't it? Like that,
100%.
that
100%.
just absolutely works to his advantage. So I do agree with you. I think he did kind of let himself down a little bit there. Although, I mean, it sounds mental saying that because both men showed, tremendous heart and everything else. But I do think, yeah, if he was a little bit more kind of mindful about the setting up attacks and being defensively
Mm,
responsible, I think
yeah,
it might have been a different fight.
100%. I think, Wardley is, he fights like a street fighter sometimes. I mean, one thing you never want to do, surely, is get into a street fight with Fabio Wardley. I mean, and that was I don't know if it was naive by Parker. I don't know if it was maybe overconfidence. He's coming off three good wins. He knocked Bakoli out in the first round, second round, whatever it was. I don't know if that's gassed his head at all. I don't know if he thinks he's put some muscle on, and maybe I don't know. He thinks he's this other really powerful heavyweight. But I think if we're talking about Parker, and you talked about his speed there, I've always looked at Parker as a very fast heavyweight. And what I would add to what you said is that he's actually even faster than that usually. When he's like 240, 250, he's even quicker than
Mm.
that. His hands are always been really fast, and his legs and his feet have been fast as well. I think he was actually slower than usual, and that didn't help either. So yeah, just quite a bad night at the office for Parker, really, in many ways, because I think a lot of, I guess, hardcore boxing fans do believe he could have won that fight. And I'm not going to say it's embarrassing because Wardley is, he's a hard night's work for anyone. We know that now. We know that for sure. But I still feel like people think that someone of the pedigree of Parker should not be losing to someone who was a white collar boxer 10 years ago, and kind of almost stooping to his level um, in times in that fight. So yeah, really interesting. But then yeah, we have to credit Wardley just for his sheer grit, and he's great value for money, isn't he? Wardley, he's just brilliant value for money. He's great to watch. Simple as that. But obviously, with boxing, there has to be some controversy. Obviously, we can't just have a nice comprehensive victory. So I believe it was round 11. Parker was hurt in round 10, and then round 11 he was hurt again. Wardley literally swinging for the fences, throwing everything in every shot, and Howard Foster decides to come in and stop the fight, which we know Howard Foster's got a record of stopping fights early. I'm going to tell you how I saw it first. So when I first looked at the stoppage, I thought that it was actually okay because I thought Parker wasn't throwing back, and I thought just wasn't throwing back enough for me. And when I first looked at it, and it didn't look, so I didn't really have too many complaints. When I watched it a second time, I'm more on the fence because Wardley, I don't know, he looked a bit ragged himself, Wardley, and he was landing. There was some big shots getting through, but almost like Wardley was going to kind of run out of gas in a minute, if that makes sense. So it's not the worst stoppage I've ever seen. I think that's my conclusion. I don't think it's a terrible stoppage because of what happened in the previous round. He was hurt, but yeah, I'd love to get your take on it, Oscar. What's your opinion on the stoppage?
I think you have to kind of add a bit of context to it, really, because if you look at just a clip of that, let's say 10 seconds,
Mm,
prior to the stoppage, then I think most people would agree that it was probably quite a premature uh, decision from Howard Foster. But the thing is, and I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, Parker was dominating the fight." He was not dominating that fight. I mean, if you're scoring it round by round, yes, he might have nicked more rounds. But if you
mm,
actually just look at the optics of what was going on,
mm,
it was a really competitive battle throughout the whole, 10, 11 rounds. And
yeah, yeah.
the momentum was swinging back and forth. It was a proper seesaw type of fight. So obviously there was that. I mean, to be fair, I wasn't scoring it round by round. You probably have Parker ahead, but I think, as I
Mm,
say, the rounds were all really close.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
most of them were anyway. But then in that 10th round, I did think because I was watching ringside, I wasn't watching on the TV. I thought to myself, Parker's massively hurt here. Like I thought he was in big trouble in that 10th round,
Mm,
and then in the 11th round, he just wasn't. the best way I can sum it up is he gave the referee a reason to jump
100%.
in. He
100%.
didn't really help himself in that moment. It's all well and good him coming out after the fight and saying, "Oh, I wasn't hurt. I was going to come back. I was going to get back into it." But you've got to be throwing back shots. Like it's as
Yeah,
simple as
yeah.
that. Otherwise, you're giving the referee a reason to step in. So I didn't have any complaints on the night, and to be fair, I still don't really have any complaints because
Mm.
I think you've got to take into consideration the 10th round where I thought Parker was badly hurt. Whatever he claims, I think he was pretty, in big trouble that round. And then in the 11th round, he just wasn't. It was a body language, like he just wasn't really giving the referee enough to say, "Look, I'm okay to continue." So I think, yeah, Howard Foster's got a bit of a reputation, but at the end of the day, I thought he kind of got it right, to be honest.
Wow, a vote for Howard Foster. But I mean, he gets so much hate, doesn't he? But
Yeah.
I definitely get where you're coming from. I definitely get where you're coming from. And look, we have to remember, yeah, we're not in the 1970s or 1980s or 1990s even, where, Muhammad Ali was taking shots on the ropes and, doing rope a dope and being allowed to take shot after shot. Boxing has progressed and it's obviously become safer. And, we don't want boxers to end up with brain damage and CTE and everything. So naturally, with the progression of boxing, you know, stoppages are going to they have gotten more premature, if that makes sense, because, they want to protect the fighter. And it's true when you take that into consideration, Parker was hurt multiple times in that fight, multiple times. He took heavy shots to the head. And we know how powerful Wardley is. We saw what he done to Fraser Clark's head. He put a dent in his head. And, it's heavyweight boxing. How do you know, Wardley was, he wasn't going to keep unleashing, and maybe one shot would get through, and then all of a sudden Parker's knocked spark cold, and then it's a completely different situation, then it's touch and go. You just don't know. It's boxing end of the day. So yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from. I do feel like, yeah, Parker just didn't help himself. I mean, again, I just feel like he done so much. That's harsh to say. It's like, I don't know. It's a bad day at the office, but it's just he made just so many questionable decisions. And don't get me wrong, 11th round, I'm sure he's knackered. I'm sure it's not just as easy as, let me just grab him or whatever. He's been hurt again, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe he just couldn't. Maybe he just couldn't. He didn't have it in him to hold. He didn't have it in him to throw back. And like you said, I mean, I always get a bit uncomfortable when I'm watching boxing and I see one guy just keep unloading. The other guy's not falling back, not throwing back. In my head, I'm thinking, just stop the fight then, because I don't want to see one. I don't want to see the guy just take shots for no reason. If the guy's not throwing back, so it's split. It definitely split debate, but I think, yeah, it's not a terrible stoppage. It's not a terrible stoppage, and it's actually it's acceptable. Like I think, like you said, in the context, it is acceptable probably. Um, In terms of, let's talk about what's next for both men. So, Fabio Wardley, I mean, who would have thought this? I mean, Fabio Wardley is calling out Usyk in the ring after the fight, which I think is incredible, to be honest. I mean, whatever happens there, I mean, that's a very proud moment for him. Um, yeah, what do you think about that prospect of Fabio Wardley stepping into the ring with Alexander Usyk?
I mean, I just think it's an incredible story, really. Like when you consider Fabio Wardley and his white collar background, like just the fact of him stepping into the ring with Usyk, regardless of what happens, like
Mm,
that's got to be one of the most remarkable sporting stories of all time, surely. Like
mm,
when you consider Fabio Wardley working like a full-time job at the age of 20, I think he was in like consultancy or something,
recruitment, yeah,
doing a bit
something like that,
doing a bit of white collar on the side. It was more or less a hobby like back then. He was 20 years old at the time, and now, a decade later, he's, in the discussion to fight one of the greatest fighters we've ever seen.
yeah.
This is just incredible, really, that we're even, as you say, that we're even talking about it. But we have to talk about it because Fabio's, he's earned his position. He's beaten, as I said earlier, what many consider to be the second best heavyweight in the world.
Mm,
He's WBO interim champion for whatever that's worth. So he's a leading contender to fight Alexander Usyk. And to be fair to Usyk, he sort of come out in the media and said, and I guess you can't take this with a pinch of salt, but he said, look, he's still very much keen to defend his undisputed championship. I don't think he's in the mood to relinquish any belts anytime soon. So
mm.
I would not be surprised if this fight happens. I think this is the next one for Usyk, which seems crazy to say, but this is. And to be honest with you, like as much as I think Usyk will completely box the ears off of him, I still think it's an intriguing fight, just
Yeah,
purely based on how dangerous of a puncher Fabio Wardley is.
yeah,
Like when
yeah,
when you're in there with a massive puncher, anything can happen. And I know we said this about Daniel Dubois and Usyk. That was the whole build-up, wasn't it? The fact
yeah,
that Daniel Dubois is this killer puncher, and all he has to do is land one shot, and it could change the whole fight.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think Usyk's, he's a special type of fighter. He's got enough ring IQ to be able to, evade a lot of those shots, and I think he'll probably do a job on Fabio Wardley. But for Fabio Wardley to get this kind of moment on that stage, you're expecting it to maybe be like a Wembley Stadium fight or something of that magnitude. I think it's just a great story, really. And yeah, I think, as mad as it sounds, there's certainly a little bit of intrigue to it.
yeah. It's a funny one. Uh, as someone who actually likes Usyk, I actually feel nervous for him in that fight, even though Usyk's boxing skills are on like a different level to Fabio Wardley. Because Fabio, you can never count someone out like that. Honestly, when someone's just got that much heart and that much. I mean, he's athletic as well. He's got that much heart, and he's just never gonna quit. I mean, I don't know.
Mm.
I've got like, I mean, look, this is very unlikely to happen. But I've got like pictures in my head of Wardley just like, I don't know, swinging a random punch. And it's probably, it's probably very unlikely. But my point is, though, Wardley, you can never count him out. Um, and I agree with you. I think that there's a chance that will happen. What I will say is that Usyk obviously has an impeccable record against the Brits, and yeah, I mean, obviously he'd be going into that as a massive favourite. But I think he deserves the fight, Wardley. I think he deserves it. Why not? He's coming off two very good wins. I mean, Justice Sweeney is a good fighter. We know that now, and Joseph Parker. We can't just look at things in hindsight. After he beat Bacoli and Zhang and Wilder, we were all singing Parker's praises. So we can't like be discrediting him now. Oh, Parker wasn't all that anyway. He wasn't in the form of his life, Parker, in many ways. And whether he got it wrong in the night or not, Wardley's still the man to beat him to end that run. So yeah, personally, I'd like to see the fight happen. I'd like to see the fight. I think Usyk's not going to retire anytime soon, so I can imagine that happening. Maybe Wembley. Maybe I mean Wardley's. His stock is ever increasing. Usyk's a big name in the UK himself after all the Brits he's beaten. So yeah, let's see it. Let's see it. Fabio Wardley's going to challenge for a world title. It looks like. What I will say though, not to discredit Fabio, but it tends to be quite a common thing actually in boxing. Maybe not to that extent of white collar to thing, because white collar is really amateur. Like usually it's like amateur to pro. White collar is even more. You know, white collar fighters don't have the same kind of background as fighters who are like in the amateur ranks. Obviously, there has been like Anthony Joshua started quite late, for example, and there's other examples as well. But still, an amazing story, like you're saying. Um, what about Joseph Parker? So he's not old. He's 33, I believe, which for a heavyweight is not old. But it's another loss. I think it's 4 or 5 losses on the record now. It's a loss that, quite a disastrous loss when you think he was on the cusp of fighting Usyk potentially. Where does he go from here? Where does he go? Does he go back to the drawing board? Does he jump straight into a big fight with one of the other contenders? What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of fights he could still be involved with, a lot of really meaningful and exciting matchups. I think obviously we saw Frank Warren during the night. He kind of lined up all his heavyweights that well a large selection of his heavyweights, and it was the likes of Ajit Kabayel, Daniel Dubois, um, David Adley, Moses Tamo. I would advise Parker to stay well away from him, by the way. But yeah, the thing is, there's still loads of really interesting fights he could be in, but I think Parker's now approaching a stage where he does need to start, thinking about an exit plan. I know he's only 33, but when you're watching him in a fight like that against Wardley, and it was almost, it was almost inhuman the amount of punishment that both fighters took. When you're
Mm.
seeing those heavy shots landing flush on both of their heads, like it's really quite, I don't know, like obviously it's exciting and it makes for a compelling spectacle, but you're thinking to yourself, like, how many miles is this putting on the clock? And then I always think back to the fight that Parker had with Joe Joyce, and he took an absolute beating in those last few rounds against Joe Joyce. I mean, do you remember
Yeah,
that? He was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
absolutely he
yeah.
was absolutely finished, and this is why a lot of people were calling for him to retire back then. And obviously, he
Mm.
went on this incredible resurgence and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely rebuilt himself, which he's got to get a lot of credit for. It's difficult to say that he should retire because obviously, as we spoke about earlier, he's had these great performances against Zhang, Bacoli, Deontay Wilder.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think just the accumulation of damage throughout his
Mhm.
career, like, it does kind of beg the question, and maybe just something that he could start considering at this stage in his career.
Mhm, mhm. No, I totally agree with you. He's taking a lot of shots, Parker. He's taking a lot of shots. Too many shots to the head, and you're right. That fight against Wardley was just brutal. It was just brutal. So no, he's still young. I mean, look, I feel like we had this conversation a few weeks ago, didn't we? About who was it? About
Oh,
Dave
Dave
Allen.
Allen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave Allen. I mean, Parker's no Dave Allen, to be fair. He's a lot more. Was obviously a lot more. Well, he's made more money. He's achieved more. Um, so you could argue that even Parker has even more of a reason to retire because he's done more. He's made the life changing money. I assume he has. Um, yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, Parker. I don't know. I mean, okay. What do you think about Parker? Has he reached his potential? Let's ask that question because he's been a world champion. He's he's been a big name. He's definitely been he's probably been a definitely top 10 fighter in the last 10 years since he's been around. Has he reached his potential though, Parker? That's what I'm thinking now. Has he been the fighter that he could have been? Because I think wasn't there a narrative that early in his career he wasn't really taking it seriously or something like that, that he wasn't quite, you know, putting as much effort as he should have been. So yeah, what do you think? Has Parker reached his potential, do you reckon? Has he done enough in his career?
I think at this stage in his career, I think he's done absolutely all he can to, be the best fighter that he could possibly be. But if he had this same approach to the sport, let's say when he was 24, 25, then
Mhm,
maybe he could have had a different career. He's had a successful career regardless,
mhm,
but could he have achieved more if he, had the same mentality and the same approach that he does now? Maybe because I do think, as you said, I think he let a lot of those prime years kind of just pass him by a little bit.
mhm,
He always just seemed like he was happy to take a loss, and it sounds crazy to say that,
mhm.
but I
Yeah,
remember that fight that he had with Dillian White, and it was like he kind of got bullied a little bit at times,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
he just didn't have this kind of, I don't know, this extra gear that a lot of fighters do, where when it gets really tough and gritty, you can just kind of claw out a victory. And I don't think he had that back then.